Why must you always make things so complicated? Just come right out and ask him to join us.
Shut up, dwarf! I will shoot you!
Hey, this looks like a lot of fun. Not sure where this show has gotten such a violent rap from.
The only good goblins are the ones who never show their faces to the light of day.
Oh. Hello there, and welcome again to Oldtaku New Tricks, where it looks like we're starting off the new year by rolling them bones and twinking out a character sheet. Yeah, it's Goblin Slayer, the kind of anime that feels right at home being watched while your friends argue over whether or not his wizard casts Mordecai's faithful hound or not. And if you got that reference, wow, we are old. I think I came into Goblin Slayer expecting the worst because most of the discourse I've seen surrounding the anime seems to focus pretty much only on the first episode. But to be fair, it's easy to see why. But I think that paints a very narrow portrait of what Goblin Slayer is really about. Not untrue, mind you, but narrow. This is Goblin Slayer. He slays goblins.
Shaman, you can't fool me.
Good thing he does too, because while everyone seems to be focused on an invading demon army, goblins have been taking the opportunity to basically be the worst thing walking on two legs, murdering, pillaging, and kidnapping women to their black heart's content. Of course, such a task demands a party to raid their dens and nests, and he attracts the attention of a priestess, an elven archer, a dwarf shaman, and a lizard man priest. And the fact that none of these characters are ever given a proper name should really tell you how you should approach Goblin Slayer as a show. Beyond the goblin slaying and the fantasy world in which it happens, the anime proper plays out like a big old love letter to D&D, right down to the world building and mythology.
The gods of light, order, and destiny, and the gods of darkness, chaos, and chance vied to see which side would be granted dominion over the world. Their struggle was played out not in battle, but with the roll of the dice.
The gods of light would accuse the gods of dark of fudging their rolls, and the gods of dark would tell the gods of light to suck their ass. Further solidifying the tabletop connections is the fact that the characters are only referred to by their roles, both in terms of story and how they function as members of a dungeon raiding party. It's literally role-playing. I just can't help but appreciate all these nods toward tabletop gaming, both in the abstract and the quite literal.
So, what's this trouble you mentioned?
Behold.
I see what you did there. And it's this appreciation that steered me through the infamous first episode, where I was basically prepared for a long, draining, dour journey into the grim dark. But that journey doesn't even last until the third episode. The series would eventually mellow out and become more a, surprisingly enough, character study. You know, with all the talk of it being the new flag bearer of dark fantasy and anime in 2018, it's not even the darkest anime in 2018. Or the second most for that matter. Oh sure, there are many a bloody battle scene, and the goblins are just horrific. But the anime and story treat them just as undoubtedly evil monsters that must be eradicated. What began as the priestess asking herself moral questions about the violent, dangerous world she lives in.
Tragedies like this happen all too often in this harsh world. But does it really have to be this way? I don't know the answer.
Ends with her gleefully taking part in wholesale goblin extermination. It's like the anime realized that it had nothing poignant, interesting, or insightful to say about the moral questions surrounding killing goblins, so it just gave up halfway through it and became an anime about killing goblins. And you know what? It's better because of it. Part of the problem of grimdark anime is that they often are just as vapid and shallow as the sunshine and rainbow anime that they supposedly oppose. Hence you get all the dumbness and stupidity without all the fun and energy, so you ostensibly get the worst of both worlds. And for all intents and purposes, that's exactly what watching the first episode feels like. As a first episode, I think it did the anime a great disservice because even though it got a lot of people talking about it, it portended a much more malicious experience than what it wound up being. The Goblins' propensity of kidnapping women and doing unto them unspeakably evil things is a factor throughout the anime, that much is true, but said scenes portraying this are, thankfully, spread out thinner than you'd think and become less overtly sexualized. Suffice it all to say, the first episode is not necessarily indicative of the show as a whole, and it does the anime no favors by it. Thankfully, the anime gets over this hump by being a shockingly charming fantasy adventure starring a main character that is pretty hilariously single-minded. As mentioned before, old Gabi here really only has one thing on the brain, and you probably don't need me to tell you why that is. The only question is which family member tragically died at the hands of a horde of goblins. But what I find so charming about the character of Goblin Slayer is that because he's so single-minded, he is just blissfully unaware of things like interpersonal relationships and common sense.
Your town may already be lost, but I'll kill some goblins.
Goblin Slayer, can't you be a little more tactful?
It's the truth.
And that's exactly why you should be more sensitive! What's wrong is you seem incapable of answering me with anything other than yeah!
I see.
And not just today!
I see.
You say that all the time too!
What's so great about Goblin Slayer's arc and characterization is that it plays both as comedy and tragedy at the same time. We're meant to laugh at his inability to respond with anything other than I see, and his continued mumblings and stumblings when it comes to being social. However, the show doesn't shy away about how emotionally and developmentally stunted he is as a person, partly because of his past, but also because of the choices he makes now. In fact, one of my favorite things about the character is that he's ignorant of the good he does by his goblin slaying and what he does outside of it.
That was scary. Ugh. Thank you so much for your help, Goblin Slayer.
I didn't do anything.
Just being here helped.
And I also know it's pretty weird to say, but I can't help but identify myself a little with Goblin Slayer, mostly because I used to roll characters like him all the time when I used to play D&D as a teenager. It's purely a personal thing, I'll fully admit that, but seeing him go through his adventures as the quiet but determined hero makes me think about the halcyon days of when I rolled a die 20 with my best friends, and I have to appreciate it for that, as purely coincidental and circumstantial that praise may be. Perhaps you can say that it benefited from lowered expectations that I found Goblin Slayer so surprisingly good, but I do find it surprisingly good, which, in my book, is the best kind of good. However, let's make it clear that I don't find it flawless. There's still the annoying and ill-advised shots of fan service, by which some of it is so blatant that I kinda find it hilarious. And there are too many times where Goblin Slayer just so happens to have the right item for a circumstance he would have no way of knowing he would be in. And while Funimation's mission to have simulcast dubs available for its most prestigious shows is admirable, the fact that they have to crank these out at near light speed does have its noticeable marks.
They aren't bright creatures, but they're not total fools.
There you go again. You're always thinking like a goblin.
Of course I am. If I didn't know how they thought, I wouldn't be very good at fighting them.
But all in all, I really enjoyed my time watching Goblin Slayer, and here's to hoping that the teased second season is just as strong as the first. But how about you all? What did you think of Goblin Slayer?